Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the round table. My name is Ben Hedges. In the studio today, joining me, I have Kay Rubacek, who is a filmmaker, author, and producer. Welcome, Kay.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Tammuz Itai, who is a geopolitical commentator and columnist for the Epoch Times. Welcome, Tammuz.
Thank you for having me.
And the topic of today's video is we are talking about the economy and personal finance and what you can expect from the Trump presidency. Okay, so what the Trump presidency means for your finances. So, well, the first thing that is quite noticeable is the stock market went up. The Dow was up 1,400 points, which is about 3.5%. The Russell 2000 of small caps was up 4.6%. So, the stock market rose. It's kind of similar to what happened when he was elected first in 2016. It was massively up on the day. And then we did see the stock market steadily rising throughout certainly the first year or so of the Trump presidency. Got a little bit more choppy later on, and obviously we had the COVID crash and then recovery. So I think we can kind of predict that probably the stock market is going to steadily rise from now until, after he gets, in office and then starts enacting some policies. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely good for people's pensions and retirement plans. Maybe not that good for alternative investments like gold and silver and everything people were rushing to invest in because they were afraid of what will happen if the stock market crashes,
right,
or there are problems. So we'll have to see what happens to that balance between the stock market and the alternative investments.
What do you think about the Bitcoin price? Because Bitcoin is kind of an alternative investment. There was some profit taking today, but then it actually went up more. So would you say that's going to be the same as gold and silver? Or would you say...
I would be more cautious when it comes to cryptocurrencies. I know Trump has gone really bullish on them recently. Right. I'm not sure I'm there personally, but we'll have to see what happens.
All right, let's move on to some of the other financial things that are probably going to happen. So he's said that he's going to try and repeal a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act had a lot of green subsidies in it for electric vehicles and solar panels and things like that. Trump wants to get rid of the funds that have been already allocated but not spent yet. It might be difficult for him to do that because he has to get Republicans to vote on it in the Senate and the House, and many of the states that have Republican senators or congresspeople have actually benefited from the Inflation Reduction Act. So it might be difficult, but what do you think?
Well, just as an example how such legislation can actually raise inflation is when car companies were given the tax credit. What happened is the car companies raised the price of EVs by that amount.
Okay.
So what happened was it was a subsidy for the car companies and prices rose, which actually makes inflation rise. So the problem with many of these policies, even if you agree in principle that certain industries or certain sectors should be helped or certain behaviors should be encouraged, you have to look at the result and not just at the intent. And the result of many of these programs is opposite to the intent.
Well, and often it's the middleman, the middle companies and the dealers, that they have the choice to either pass on that price or they can absorb it, which often they have, at least to some degree. So it really depends on how it's going to take place in action. I think everyone's watching to see, he promised to bring down inflation. So yes. Now it's really, he's next on the line for that. But also how much of it does the Federal Reserve control? There's limits to what a president can do, but he's promised a lot and he's going to have to deliver.
He has promised lower interest rates.
He has.
And in theory, the Fed is independent, so I'm not sure how he's going to necessarily do that, but we'll have to wait and see. The next item that he's going to do, obviously, is extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Basically, the lower tax rates need to be extended. Also, the extra 20% pass-through business deduction. If you run your own business under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you get an extra 20% deduction on your taxes. That needs to be extended as well. But Trump has talked about getting rid of income tax altogether. I think he mentioned that on Joe Rogan.
Yes, he did.
And replacing it with tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not?
Yeah.
So I'm suspecting that we're not just going to see an extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but some tinkering with it. And I doubt he's going to eliminate income tax altogether, but we're probably going to see a lowering of the tax rate, even lower than he lowered it in the first iteration of the act.
I think there could be some flow-on effect here from him bringing on the team that he's bringing on, with Elon Musk coming in as supposedly as the what's the government efficiency or something.
Doge,
right?
The Department of Government Efficiency.
So what I'm keen to know what kind of effect that will have on inflation and the economy, because it's inevitable that it will. Musk came in and he fired 80% of Twitter's employees, and then he made the company operate in the manner that it is now. It's still running. So I think there could be a lot of things that are going to affect it in different ways, and I don't know how much that's going to flow on to this inflation exactly, but I think there'll be benefits coming from places that we couldn't have even imagined or thought of before.
Right.
That's going to affect the economy.
Well, definitely regulation when it's too onerous, things take too much time and require so much more money, and even the time costs money because you have financing and things like that. So that really can have a very direct impact on how much things end up costing to the public. And in terms of tariffs, until like a little over 100 years ago, there was no federal income tax.
He said that, didn't he? He said we want to go back to like 1890 or something. I think he said that when he visited the barber shop in the Bronx.
In the 1890s and all, this is when the country was relatively the richest it ever was. It had all tariffs. It didn't have an income tax. In the old days, 1890, 1880, we had so much money, they had to set up committees, blue ribbon committees, how to spend our wealth. We had no idea how to spend it with so much money. Then we went to the income tax system, and the rest is sort of history.
Yeah, it was basically tariffs.
Yes.
And then they changed it for various reasons, which are, I think, beyond the scope of this conversation. But it's not like it's unprecedented. It's just unprecedented in today's world.
Right.
But
the past 70 years, 80 years.
But we may see some sort of combination, right? Because he talked about raising tariffs on all countries and 60% on China. And I think Bloomberg Business predicted that if he actually does that, imports from China will decline tremendously. So we will have to see, because you say imports from China decline, domestic prices will rise, but then maybe something else will happen. I think it's really hard to gauge.
The balance.
It's to really gauge how everything will come together, because this one will make it go up, this one will make it go down. But if overall the economy becomes more robust and more successful, then I think people will be better off.
So the first time, prices didn't really rise because he had no inflation. Inflation was down like at 1%. Chinese government actually had export subsidies to a lot of their companies, so they absorbed, I think it was like 80% of the cost of those tariffs. So people say, it's going to cost us. I think they were saying a 20% sales tax nationally or something. That was actually the tariffs. It wasn't a sales tax at all, but they were just, calling it that. But you have to really wait and see whether that would happen or not. How much of it will China absorb itself rather than us having to pay? Yeah. Obviously, Trump hopes that they'll absorb most of it, right?
Yeah.
I think also in the past few years, many companies, Western companies who've been manufacturing or operating in China have been decoupling because of the way the CCP has treated foreign companies. Foreign direct investment in China in the past couple of years declined tremendously.
Right.
And so businesses quietly, though, have already shifted and are shifting production out of China.
Yes.
And at the same time, China is shifting production out of China to avoid the tariffs. So
and it's not even China's not even the cheapest place to make things anymore.
Yeah.
There was that chart that's been spread around. It shows that in China, the average cost per hour to manufacture stuff is at $8 now, whereas India, Thailand, they're down at around $2. Yeah.
I mean, even now, the situation in China in terms of the economy, they drove away foreign direct investment. They shut their most successful industries like Tencent and Alibaba to gain stricter control. Their real estate is in such a bad state. They have like ghost cities that nobody's ever lived in those buildings. Everything was over-levered. And because they're so big and because many people, including Western banks, are enabling them, they've been able to keep coasting.
Yes.
But, at some point, I don't know if it's going to be a tipping point or gradual, but that's not sustainable in the long term. So even before Trump has been certified as the president, these trends are already happening in China. And maybe he will be the tipping point. I don't know.
Well, as much as I'd like to keep talking about China, let's bring it back to how, Trump's presidency is going to affect finances of people here in this country. Another thing he wants to do is a temporary cap on credit card interest rates, capping them at 10%. Now, currently, US credit card debt is at over $1.1 trillion, which is a historic high. The average interest rate is around 25%. Okay, I think maybe 24% according to LendingTree. So let's say you owe $10,000 on a credit card. If you do the math, it's about $208 per month in interest that you're going to be paying. Just the interest without paying off any of the card. And of course, many people owe way more than $10,000.
Over the past few years, I made some poor financial decisions, and I've ended up in $150,000 of credit card debt.
If he wants to bring it down to 10%, I mean, it's going to more than halve those interest payments.
That'll help a lot of people.
I think it's a great
really,
idea.
it will help
Yeah.
a lot of people.
I mean, if you do it forever, it's going to obviously it affects the bottom line of the credit card companies. They're probably making a lot of money at the moment, though, because people have so much debt. So maybe if you do it temporarily for 1 or 2 years, it's not going to really impact them as much. But if you did it forever, they're going to have to start cutting other parts of the service provided on the cards, like the insurances they provide, the rewards they provide, etc. Anyway, let's move on. So there's 3 more proposals. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and no tax on overtime. Obviously, these will have to make it through Congress, probably as part of the updating of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But what do you think about those? Kay, you first.
I like that it's benefiting the working class. I think a lot of them turned out for Trump this time. And they're expecting him to deliver. So there's a lot of scare campaigns around saying that Trump is going to gut Social Security and that he will gut other benefit, health care. So I think people are scared, and some of them are just betting on Trump, and they're really hoping that he'll come through for them. And I think these are some of the ways that, if they're carried out, that it'll help people.
I mean, there is a case to be made for a simple tax code is better than a complicated tax code.
Totally.
And these things are benefiting people who need it, but on the other hand, they're making it more and more complicated. So some people say, just drop 2 points from the overall tax.
Yeah.
Until a certain bracket, it's simpler, and people won't try to tweak around the different regulations.
It would be simpler if we just had a flat tax on everything.
Yeah.
Just one bracket, like 15%,
Or no income tax at all, right? Look,
Right.
there's a few ideas out there. And with all the proposed changes in regulation in other parts of the economy and industry, I think these may sound more, we're adding complexities in some area, but I'm hoping that we'll see a big reduction in complexity with the amount of laws and bureaucracy that currently exist. If we can get rid of some of those that really aren't necessary, then that might offset some complications here.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, let's get on to the final point, which is something you mentioned, Timuz, bringing energy prices down. Drill, baby, drill, as you say, or as Trump will say.
We will drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill, baby, drill.
That is going to benefit pretty much everything, right? Because everything needs gas to be delivered, etc. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, basically
And how is he going to bring down energy prices as well?
Well, basically just allow companies to drill again, give licenses that were freezed,
Okay.
whether in the continental US or in Alaska, that other places. There is the environmental discussion always, but I think when you look at it, it's not that the US has consumed less gas now. It just bought it from other regimes, not all of them friends, like Venezuela and others. So, and at the end of the day, when you just allow the energy companies to go back to drilling, then price, obviously there is more supply, prices go down, and not just at the pump, because when you manufacture things, you use energy.
And the delivery.
Delivery, everything. So that adds multiple times to the cost of things, the price of gas,
Multiple
price
instances
of energy. So that can definitely help. And also, as the previous Trump administration, it can also reduce the dependency of the U.S. on foreign nations and their interests, because we don't need their oil anymore.
My perspective is I like how Trump's the drill baby drill is one aspect. The other aspect is I like how he's joined forces with Maha candidate RFK, right? Make America healthy again. So, but he's made very clear in a number of public statements, Trump has made very clear.
Even yesterday.
Yes, even in his victory speech, he talks very highly of RFK, but he says, don't touch the oil.
Bobby, leave the oil to me. Stay away from the liquid gold. Other than that, go have a good time, Bobby.
I think that's a good place to stop. So that was us trying to give you a video on how Trump is going to affect your wallet. Of course, we kind of meandered off into a lot of other topics, but I hope it's been interesting for you because that's kind of what this show is all about anyway. So thank you to Muz and Kay for joining us. Leave your comments below and please subscribe to the Round Table for more videos like this. See you next time.